Now, let's bring in Emma Shortis, a great friend of the show. She is the Director of Security and International Affairs at the Australia Institute, also here in DC for the big election week. Emma, you have been in Pennsylvania as well. I want to pick up on that observation by Carrington of this extraordinary turnout at voting stations. What does this mean to you, and who is more likely to benefit from that turnout?
Look, Michael, I think it's early to say that, but being in Philadelphia last night at Harris's last big rally, you know, anecdotally, it's the longest line I've ever seen. We walked for 20 minutes to try and find the end of it, and it kept growing, and it was full of young people and young women in particular. So we'll have to wait and see what the demographics of the turnout are, but judging by the Harris rally last night, you know, if young people and young women turn out, that could be pretty significant for Harris in Pennsylvania.
It's all about who comes out to vote. And before I come to you next, I want to bring in a part of an interview I did with Christine Matthews, who is a prominent Republican Party pollster in this town, and she told me of the importance of those voters in those 7 swing states.
I think in the swing states, who decides to turn out? So do young women who are, you know, registering at higher numbers, women of color, do they turn out at higher levels than, say, non-college educated white men, non-college educated Hispanic men? And so it's really who's most motivated. And I would tilt the scale a little bit towards women. And for that reason, in my mind, I'm thinking Kamala Harris has a slight edge, but I'm absolutely not predicting anything. Could really go either way.
So, Christine Matthews there, Republican Party pollster, very influential in Washington. What do you think, Emma, about the importance of the female vote? Kamala Harris is obviously seeking to become the first female president. And also, how much will Donald Trump's words about women, you know, saying he'd be their protector, whether they like it or not, will be read by women?
Well, look, again, you know, this is anecdotal, but I was in Charlotte and in North Carolina over the weekend, and again, the audience was full of women. Women outnumbered men by just an extraordinary margin, and they saved their biggest reaction for Harris's lines on reproductive freedom in particular. So, you know, as much as polling suggests that the economy is the most important issue, I think we can't underestimate how much reproductive freedom is a mobilising issue, particularly for women. And I think it's certainly possible, you know, that if Harris wins in these critical states like North Carolina, like Georgia, both of which have really strict abortion bans, you know, if Harris wins, I think it will be off the back of young women's mobilisation and African Americans women's mobilisation in particular.
OK, let's toss the coin the other way. If Donald Trump wins, what impact, if any, will that have on the Australia-US relationship, trade ties? He's talking about across-the-board tariffs, AUKUS. What will it mean for us?
Look, I think it will mean an awful lot to Australia. It will put a lot of pressure on the relationship because we know Trump himself is very unpredictable and his policies will affect us. You know, his tariff policies on China will have an effect on Australia's economy. But more broadly, you know, I think a Trump victory, given, you know, the threat he poses to American democracy, will put pressure on the shared values of our relationship with the United States. And I don't think we've really grappled with what that might mean, you know, in our closeness to the United States. But, you know, I think it's important to remember that we don't have to just cop whatever Donald Trump does. We do have power, we do have influence, and I think it's really important for us to keep standing up for our democratic values.
And how concerning would it be if we don't have a result by tonight? Indeed, we don't have a result tomorrow, the next day, heading towards the weekend. It has been such a volatile campaign. How much of a worry is violence, is unrest, is uncertainty?
Look, I think it's a real risk. You know, Donald Trump has been laying the groundwork for election conspiracies for a long time now, and he's really ratcheted up in the last few days, you know, saying that the election has to be called by 10 p.m. or 11 p.m, which, of course, it doesn't have to be. That's not how accounting works. But that is really concerning, given that, you know, he has a history of inciting his supporters, and in such a volatile environment, that's particularly dangerous. You know, 2024 is not 2020. I think we won't necessarily see a repeat of what we saw last time, but the risk is very real.
Okay, Emma, I really appreciate your insights. Oh, before we go, any Philly cheesesteaks for you in Philadelphia?
I'm a vegetarian, don't tell anyone.
You're not missing much. Emma Shortis, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael.